Hi guys, it's Alston. Now we have already looked into top domain name registrars and also we have looked into what are the factors which you should be aware when you are deciding your domain name register. In this video, we are going to focus on some of the most frequently asked questions when it comes to domain names or domain register in general. So let's get started. The first question is, what is a domain name? A domain name is an internet address which identifies your website. A domain name can contain characters, hyphen, and numbers. It cannot contain special characters or space. And also it will contain one dot, which means all the text which I mentioned now, it will be front, and finally it will have another part at the back which is called extension. Domain name is used to find your web hosting or website where your website files is located, and it is unique for everyone, which means another person can have the same domain. If you registered abc.com, it is unique for you and another person can't purchase abc.com while you have the ownership, and also it can't be duplicated or impersonated. For example, in our case, our site domain name is digitalmarketingmind.com. So that is what is a domain name. The next question is, what is a TLD? TLD stands for top level domain, which essentially means the extension after the dot there will be something called domain extension. TLD represent these are different domain names which is controlled by something called ICANN, which is stand for Internet Corporation of Assigned Names and Numbers. The TLDs, there are so many stuff, over thousands of TLDs are there, but generally the popular ones are .com, .org, .net. You can see wide range of it, but basically the name part, domain name part, whatever the name you give, that is your domain name, and after the dot, whatever the extension is called top level domain or TLD, which stand for .org. There is also other different TLDs like country specific, generic, all this one, but basically it refers to the extension. Why do I need a domain name? You need to register a domain name because it is a key component for your website. When you register a domain name, you are declaring that you own that domain name and it becomes a part of in the internet DNS system. DNS system is something which used to find web hosting or computer services which has a unique name. So once you register a domain name, you specify a IP address within the DNS server which will point out to your web hosting. So domain name is most probably like a visiting card which shows the way to the location. That way it will show when the user types in your website name, it looks into the IP of that domain name, then it connects with the relevant web hosting server and gets the file for you. That is the reason why domain name is important, because it is unique and it identifies where your website files are located in the internet. The next question is, what is a domain registrar? Domain registrar is a company that manages domain on behalf of its customers. They will help you to register, renew, transfer and manage your domain names from an easy dashboard wherever you can access it. Registrars do not own the domain but rather manage those domains on behalf of their customer. And if you want to find the top website register, please make sure to check our guide. And when customer submits the interest, domain register purchase the domain on behalf of them from the international body and keep it in a easy manageable way for the customers. What is a ICANN accredited domain name registrar? ICANN accredited domain registrar mean that ICANN organization, which is an organization manages international domain name system. To be a ICANN accredited registrar, what it means is that ICANN is a centralized non-profit body which manages both domain names and addresses on the internet, where they have set of guidelines, regulations to make sure the domain registrar is following all the necessary guidelines to provide effective and safe services for customer. So when we say a domain is ICANN accredited, that means that domain register has been checked by this non-profit body and said that the domain registration follows all the guidelines it's set by it, and it's approved by that to be in a safe domain name register. So ICANN terms of condition include maintaining a high level of quality services, protection of customer privacy, keeping the registry clean by protecting cyber squatting, and lot more rules. The next question is, what is the difference between domain register and a web hosting? A hosting company helps you to host website files, and you can use their server space like renting out. So whatever the files you want to keep in your website, you can like storing on your computer. We just rent out a web space and we store all our website file on that. That is what we refer to as web hosting. Domain name register is once you have reserved the domain you registered, you will just point out that domain name to your web hosting. So what happens is, you have all the files in web hosting spaces, you buy this particular domain name and you connect that domain name to the web hosting. So this contains all the files. This just contains address. Domain name just contains address for the web hosting. So once the user comes to domain name, that address will point out wherever the website file is located on the internet. So you can see, you can register domain name with hosting company or register. Both offer these services, but it does not matter, because as long as you are able to set up DNS and name service, you can use any different services as you want. The next question is, how long do domain names last? This is really important because domain name registration is not permanent. Domain name is only valid for a specific time, and after that registration period on whichever the contract you took is finished, that domain name will be expired and can be deleted and put back into open market again, or could be sold in an auction if that domain name considered as valuable. The length of registration which is allowed for each of its domain name will range based on the extensions and also your registrar's capability. So each of this need to be considered. For example, .com, the maximum you can have is 10 years, and like that you can decide on that. So you don't permanently own a domain name, you just own it for whatever the time period contract you have registered for it. Next, who owns a domain name? Because once you register the domain name, we think that we own the domain name, but it's not technically true. Where you get to register the rights to use the domain name for a period. You are not owning the domain name for permanently once you registered. You just get the right for that domain name for whatever the period you are going to register it. For that privilege, you pay the registrar who updates all the records and make sure that domain name is unique and provides a interface for you to manage your domain name. During that time, you control everything related to that domain name, and even if you want, you can sell that ownership or control to another person. And top level domains are leased and run from the organizations which it brings all the domain name, and they manage DNS addresses which controls the IP to help to connect domain name with hosting. So you simply pay a yearly fee to maintain that domain. So as long as keep on paying the yearly fees or keep on making sure that you have active contract with that domain name, you own that domain name for that particular time period and not permanent. How much does a domain name cost? The domain name will cost you different pricing depend on both extension of your choice and the registrar. What I mean by that is the domain name which are available and there is no restriction, it will simply depend on both domain registrar and also the extension. For example, .com extension price is different from .tv. So the price will change considerably based on the extensions, and also one domain register might charge $8, another domain register might charge $10. So the price will also differ based on the register. And also if you are planning to buy a domain name which is not readily available but it's a premium domain, or is it if it on auction, then the price will be considerably more because it will be depending on the person who's looking to sell that domain. So domain name cost can range from anywhere from $1 to millions of dollars as according to the demand and the value of that domain name. And also you can see the premium domains or auction domains can be bought from directly auction markets. And also if you are looking for some extra services for your domain name such as domain privacy, advanced DNS management and everything, those services will cost you extra unless domain registrar is offering those for free. The next question is, can you change the domain register once registered? Yes, you can. You can transfer your domain from one register to another register. Where even if you register with a company A, after some time if you decide you want to switch, you can do with another company of your choice. But you have to make sure that what are the restriction placed. For example, most domain registers will have a 60-day non-transferable lock policy, which means as soon as you register you won't be able to transfer for the first 60 days, and the last 60 days before the renewal comes up, or even when you change any contact details with the registrations regarding your domain. So a domain register can have multiple policies. So make sure to check your current provider to see the policy, and also if they charge any fees for transferring it also. And once you are transferring a domain name to a different domain register, that domain register might have a transfer cost. For example, most domain register will charge the annual registration rate when you transfer, but in the same time they will add one more year to your domain name. So you can transfer after the necessary time period is passed, and choosing based on whichever your favorite one, paying the transfer cost fee, you can transfer your domain. What is the difference between .org and .com TLD? .org, .com TLD both are top level domains. Org is mainly used for organizational or community purposes, which indicates an organization, a group of people. For example, if you want to donate money to someone who's sick or offering services, non-profit organization usually tend to use .org. For example, .com is one of the most common or most popular, which widely used for any number of purposes, but the idea for .com was meant to be commercial purposes, but it is the most popular TLD on the market where every type of businesses try to get a .com mostly. Does it matter where you buy your domain name? Choosing the domain register is really important because it ensures that the company that registers the domain on your behalf, you need to make sure that is trustworthy and provide a great service, because you are essentially asking the registrar to manage your services and provide a trustable and reliable services. So if you didn't do proper investigation and decide whether that is actually a good register or not, Once you registered, you might face so many problems from downtime, poor support, or unethical practices, or anything can happen. So you should always make sure that you need to know where you buying your domain and whether that is a safe place for you and best or right place for you. The next question is, can you permanently buy a domain name? You can't permanently buy a domain name. It will expire after a set of period of time. You will have to renew it. What that means is, once you register a domain name, you only will register for a set time. It can be 1 year or 10 years, 5 years or anything like that. But you need to make sure that you are actively renewing your domain once the renewal process comes up. If you didn't renew, then the domain can be expired, deleted, and can be put back to the public or could be sold at an auction. So you don't permanently buy a domain name. How long does it take to register a domain name? It really depends on the type of domain registrar. For example, it depends on the domain name you are planning to buy, and it will take planning to buy. The name means if it's readily available, then it will be instant. If it's a premium domain or auction based domain, the length of process will differ for each one, and it will also take a time depending on registrar. For example, if you are buying just available common domain in Namecheap, GoDaddy or anything like that, most of the time the process will be instant. But let's say, for example, in my case, if I want to register a .lk domain, which is a country specific domain, I had to wait like 2 to 3 days to get the approval process, then I can only buy it. And also it will depend on registrar also. Some time registrars can place some limitation or some verification process which can delay the process. So the generally you can buy domain names very instantly or within 10 minutes, but most it might take 1 week, and it will based on depending on several factors. The next question is, what if the domain name I want is taken? There are millions of domain extensions, and you are likely to find a domain name you are looking available. But since the .com, .nets are one of the most used and been in the internet for more than 10 years now, most of the time you will feel some of the really good extension domain names are missing, and you don't want to go with other domain extension. In that cases, you have two options. One is to find a new name, or try to find the domain name with a different extension, or try to talk to the existing person who owns the domain name, or try to hire a domain broker agency if you don't want to talk directly, and try to ask them to talk on your behalf and try to get the domain name also. And domain name registrar itself provide these kind of services. One good example is GoDaddy does it, where if you are looking to purchase a domain name which is not available, if you contact them, they will talk on behalf of your and try to purchase that domain name, but it's not guaranteed. For example, if the person who's purchased the domain is not willing to sell, then you can't get the domain name. So you just need to be aware of that. The next question is, can you buy a domain name without hosting? Of course, you can buy a domain name without hosting. It's just like buying a car without engine, where you will need both the car and the engine to start driving it. Where domain name is like pointing is the info you will have to point your domain name to the web hosting where all the files are stored. So you can buy both of them separately, but only when you connect both of them you will have website. So it does not matter whichever the one you buy first, only when you have both you can start using it. How do you check whether domain name availability status? You can check whether the domain name is available or not through many free tools. Where if you go into Google and type domain availability checker, domain finder, and also most domain register itself provide this feature. So you can just go into domain name search, look for ideas, look for searches. Some domain registers even provide domain generations tool, domain suggestions tools to give you more ideas, and also they offer bulk domain availability checkers also. So you just not restricted to check one domain at a time. If you have 50 different domain ideas, you can paste everything and you can get the list on whatever the available, and you can check even more also. So you can use these free services to see whether the domain you are looking to register is available or not. How do I prove ownership of domain name? This is one of the important question I get asked around. Let's say, for example, if someone is asking, can you prove that you actually own your domain name? There are a couple of ways you can show that you own the domain name. One is just by creating a text file within your hosting account under the domain name. And if you visit that text file from your browser, you can type whatever the information inside the text file as a way of confirming your ownership. You can also add a text record within the DNS which your hosting is managed, so that person can reverse look up the DNS and get the information from there. Or you can share screen or show your backend access screen and show that you actually own the domain as a proof of ownership. How to choose the best domain name for my businesses? A best domain name is something that is short, easy to type, and reflects your brand, reflect your purpose, and make it the spelling really easy to understand for your customers to find. There is no official rule book, there is no official guidelines. Try to be creative, try to find something which will resonate with your audience, and you can try to create a domain name on based on that. There will be a lot more factors. I will try to cover this in a separate guide, but this is the overall view where you just try to be something, create something short, easy to use, and reflects your brand and purpose to your audience. The next question is, my domain name has expired. What do I do? First, domain names are issued only for a certain amount of time when they are created. It's not permanent, as we saw. After that expire, you will need to renew it through the same company you registered, because they are the ones who are actively holding the contract. So if you fail to renew the domain name before it expires, it will be deleted and can be put into auctions or can be released into public. Another person can register or buy that domain name. Some registers will have something called grace period. Even once you passed renewal time, for a short amount of time, they will still help you to recover that domain name either for free or for a fee, depending on the domain registrars. So make sure that if you permanently want to own that domain, you buy a domain name in bulk years, like or bulk registering for 5 years, 10 years. And also make sure that you set up auto renewal with an active funding sources, so you don't miss out on that. Domain name backorder, and how does it work? When you register a domain name, there can be other people's also who's interested in that same domain name as you. So if the domain name is registered, another person can do a back order for that domain name, which will means once that domain name is expired, please reserve that domain name for me, so I will get the access for that domain name. So they can put a back order, and when it becomes available, the domain, it will automatically register to the account of the person who submitted the first back order for that domain name. What is the differences between URL and a domain name? A domain name is the title of the website, while URL is the actual address. Where domain name something like example.com and URL could show either the home page or the sub pages or the different pages. So one domain name, but one domain name can have hundreds or thousands of URL depending on the website. For example, if you own a clothing store located in 123 Main Street, your business title or the name, which is Main Street Clothing Store, will be your domain name, and your address, actual place, and all the location inside inside your store will be the URLs for you. URL is known as Uniform Resource Locator, refers to the web addresses of any page or site on the internet. That includes your domain name, which is just one section of URL, and rest of the resources which is inside that particular domain name. The next question is how long should a domain be? Basically, you can choose the length of domain name. You can choose any length for the domain name. However, usually the shorter is the better one for the domain name, because it makes it easier to remember, easier to type, but not like an ironclad rule, but just as a guideline. A good rule of thumb is to use something that your customers can easily remember, easily can recognize you, and also most people will try to use meaningful words and fewer syllables to make sure that that your domain stand out and also easy to remember and type. For SEO purposes, basically your domain name can be understand. Make your domain name within your niche, your domain name to reflect on your niche. It's not powerful as it used to be previously. Exact match domain keyword, all those things came into play, but we have moved into a point where as long as it reflects your business, or even if you didn't reflect your business but it is a good brandable domain name, you can properly do a good SEO for it, and you don't need to worry too much about the domain name. How does a domain name system work? A domain name system is what makes it possible to translate a URL into IP address and vice versa. What this means is information about the domain name is stored in a form of database on servers around the world. Every time you visit a website, your web browser contacts one of these servers, which returns your requested web page along with the corresponding IP address, which is like a computer mailing address, but in this case it is the web hosting IP addresses. As requests are made on each page within the site, similar action occurring again, and each successive request will result in another server being contacted until eventually all the pages comprising the complete site have been received by the browser. Basically, domain name system will keep a record of domain names and the IP addresses. So when you type a domain name, it will look up in the database and see which is the IP address it is linked to that, and it will send back the IP address to the browser, and IP address will be used to contact that web server to get all the hosting files for that particular page, and this will be it will be automatically done on the backend without user even needing to know this process. How do I find the owner of a domain name? You can find the owner of domain name commonly in WHOIS database, which is free to access. You can use any number of WHOIS free tools to check up on your on a particular domain ownership, and it will show all the available information on that record. However, sometimes it can be difficult if that person is using a WHOIS privacy guard. So you have to go through the anonymous email option you have, or you have to reach out and do some work and try to find that particular user's contact address in another way, from using social media, website, or reaching out to them directly through contact details, or even you can use email lookup tools on different like Enter.io, Tomba, and all these ones where you can look up the email address. If it's available on voice, then it's a straightforward job. If it's protected, then you need to find a workaround and try to find that. I will try to create a in-depth guide in this also. I'll link it in the description for you to check it out. And those are the most important questions can be asked during about domain names and domain registers. If you have any other questions relating to domain name or domain register, please let me know. I will answer that also. Once again, thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you have a great day. Cheers.